Hello, welcome to the very first ever podcast from London TravelWatch. This is our new podcast, Talking Transport. And today we're going to be celebrating 25 years of London TravelWatch. We're going to be taking a look back at how transport for people travelling in London has changed over the last 25 years and some of the ways in which London TravelWatch has helped with that. And then we're going to be looking ahead to the next 25 years and seeing how might it change in future? What do we want to see for the travellers in London? But before that, I think we should probably introduce ourselves. So I'm Tricia Hayes. I'm the chair of London TravelWatch, and Michael.
And I'm Michael Roberts, Chief Executive of London TravelWatch.
Excellent. And Michael, would you just like to say a little bit, because I know that we'll have a lot of people watching who know us well, but would you like to say a little bit about what London TravelWatch is, what we do?
So we're the statutory watchdog for the travelling public in London. We're here to have your back if you use any mode of transport, from walking to taking the Elizabeth line. If you feel that the system has let you down, we'll pick up your case if we think there's a chance that we can get a good deal from you from Transport for London, for example, or a rail company. But we're also here to spot the big issues, campaign for change where change is needed, try and keep the good things, because there are plenty of good things in London transport, even though there's plenty of things that don't always work well. So a watchdog and a campaigning body, really.
And we've been working together for just over a year now.
Yeah.
And it's a great organisation to be part of. I mean, I work most of my professional life in transport. I brought up 3 children in London. I remember really powerfully that feeling you get when the transport system kind of lets you down at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, doesn't help you get through. It can be it's the difference between a happy, successful day and a kind of miserable failure day. So the work we do in TravelWatch is so important to the quality of life of people who live in London or travel to London.
I mean, I've been in this job now just over 2 years. I love it. There's never a dull day. There's always something to focus on. I mean, one of the things I'm really amazed about is that we are a really small organisation. There's only 11 of us. And yet on our day, we can have a really, really big impact. And personally, not just for me, but also for everyone who works in the organisation, knowing that we can make a difference is the thing that gets us up in the morning.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in our conversation today, we're going to have a chance to look in a bit more detail at some of those ways in which we have made a difference and some of the things that we want to see better in future.
Yeah.
But let's just talk a bit about how we've prepared for our conversation today. So we asked some of our partners, some of the people who've worked in London TravelWatch, some of our previous leadership of TravelWatch, people who've worked in our team, our previous chief executives, to give us a few reflections on our 25-year journey as an organisation. And those have been fantastic. And if you're watching and you gave us some of your thoughts, thank you. It's been great. But that's given us a lot to think about in terms of what have we done over the last 25 years? What have we achieved and what is there still to do? So the first question that we asked that group of stakeholders was just to give us a sense of what they thought the most positive change had been in London's transport system over the last 25 years. As somebody who's been commuting for more than 30 years, that feels a bit personal. But we got a lot of really good responses, didn't we? What did people say to us was the single best thing to have happened?
So I think probably top of the pops, as it were, in the responses that we got from former colleagues before we worked here, was the change that was being brought around by Oyster, the move to contactless more generally, the kind of fare structure, the zonal fare structure in London that sits behind that. That was far and away the thing that most people noticed as making a big difference to London. But also, a lot of people pointed out that the Elizabeth line, Crossrail as was once known, the delivery of that, and not far behind that, the development of the London Overground network, were projects that were felt to have made a really big difference to the travelling public in London. So some really big things. And I guess what's interesting for me is that they kind of remind us of the basic truth, which is that if you use transport, what you pay and how you pay for it, and what you get in return in terms of the quality of service are the things that matter. They're the fundamental things. Oyster and contactless is all about making it easy to pay and knowing that you can pay confident that you're getting the best value fare for your journey. The Elizabeth line was about transforming the travelling experience. And it's a combination of price, quality. That's what delivers what people want.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, starting with the contactless payment, Oyster. I mean, Oyster was not just innovative in the UK, it was innovative globally. So it was a way of thinking about how you pay for transport that London completely led the world on. It has continued to lead the world. But in London TravelWatch, we've had to do a little bit of work on thinking about the interests of people who've not been able to always make the adjustments to new ways of paying for your travel, or who haven't always had access to contactless payment. So do you want to say a little bit about some of the things that we've been worried about or that we would like to see changing in the future?
Yeah, I think for many of us, the move to smarter ways for paying for your travel has been a really positive development.
Yeah.
But we're really conscious that there are parts of the London population for whom the move to digital, for example, is not easy. And either they can't because perhaps the systems are not accessible to them, or they won't move to digital because they lack confidence that actually they're going to be paying the right thing by using digital forms of transport. For them, there is a risk that they'll get left behind while all the rest of us are reaping the benefits of these technological changes. I mean, I'm stunned to read to this day that there are over 250,000 people who don't have bank accounts.
It's such a big number.
And if you don't have that, you can't make use of digital forms of payment. And there are lots of reasons why they're in that situation. And our job is to try and make sure that as all of us move forward, that people like that aren't left behind and that there are ways in which they can pay for their travel that work for them.
Do you think that cash is going to continue to be an important payment mechanism on London's transport system for the foreseeable future? Because I think our work suggests that sometimes people who pay cash pay a lot more to travel than people who can use contactless technology.
Yeah, I think it's going to be here for a while. It is an increasingly small part of the travel picture, but for those people who have no option but to use cash, it's fundamentally important that they still have that ability. For example, as indeed London TravelWatch colleagues managed to secure before, when cash was retained as an option at tube stations, they can turn up at tube station and pay by cash. The sting in the tail of the moment is if they buy a paper ticket using cash, they're going to be paying over the odds compared with if they used a different form of payment method, which is one of the reasons why we've said recently, that doesn't quite feel right. Surely something must be possible to try and reduce that price difference.
So well done, London, for leading the world on contactless payment. Well done, London, for inventing Oyster. But let's just not assume that absolutely everybody needs the same way to pay to get access to the transport services they need to get around London. And let's make sure that the people who need value for money transport the most aren't the people who are paying most for their journeys.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And going back to what I was saying earlier about the things that people have pointed out as successes, reminding us that at the end of the day, affordable, good quality transport is the thing that really matters. Despite the wonderful things that have been done in London, value for money still scores relatively low in when you ask Londoners. Fewer than 6 out of 10 Londoners, if you ask them today, will say that they get value for money from Transport for London services. And I haven't seen the figures recently, but if you ask them about national rail services in and out of the capital, I think that figure will be even lower. It certainly was in the past.
Yeah.
So notwithstanding all the progress, there is still so much to be done in terms of affordability, in terms of the quality of the services that come through.
And I guess here in TravelWatch, we're particularly interested in thinking about those people who are working in London who haven't been able to pick up the post-COVID working from home opportunities, who don't really have any choice but to travel into London. If you're working in a healthcare environment or a retail environment where you have to be physically present to do your job, you don't have some of the ability that maybe other kinds of workers are to avoid kind of travel costs. And those are, I think, those people that we particularly need to look out for.
Exactly. And actually, I was kind of interested that when we asked former TravelWatch colleagues what they thought had been the biggest developments in the last 25 years, no one actually mentioned COVID.
Yeah.
Which, of course, has been kind of like huge for all aspects of life. But there are a few aspects of life for which it's not been bigger than transport, because it has such an immediate impact. And since then, although transport traffic levels have recovered, people are going back to using public transport, it's not back at the level that it was before. So it was intriguing, I thought, that no one mentioned that.
Yeah. Let's go back to, so we've talked a lot about how people are paying for transport and the options available to pay cash. But a minute ago, we talked about the Elizabeth line as being one of the big achievements, one of the big changes in London's transport system over the last 25 years. And certainly that's been a long journey from some of the initial work on Crossrail, maybe 30, 35 years ago. Why do you think Crossrail and then Elizabeth Line has been such an important change for London? And what have we, I guess, as London TravelWatch, what have we learned in the process of seeing the Elizabeth Line come on stream?
Well, I suppose it's been about those classic things that matter. So you've just got increased capacity. There's more seats and standing space available. The fact that it connects the east to the west of London in one easy go. Just the quality of the travelling experience, the air-conditioned, smooth ride that people can get. The emphasis upon more accessible transport. It's not perfect on the Elizabeth Line, as we know. There are some stations which aren't properly step-free, but if you certainly look at some of the central stations, phenomenal improvement in the quality of access. I mean, the list goes on. If you believe Transport for London, the fact that it has unlocked parts of the capital to provide new housing. I've read a stat that said that for those stations along the line, on the Elizabeth Line, if you look at the catchment, the delivery of that project has unlocked over 70,000 new homes since it was built. It's just a phenomenal example of what you can do when you have got a good project, well executed. Eventually, it did take time for us to get there, and you're prepared to invest money to back it.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's a long game, this, isn't it?
Yeah.
Planning and delivering transport infrastructure to unlock housing, to transform quality of life. It does require a degree of persistence. And I think that's why in London TravelWatch, we have supported the idea that organisations which have a responsibility for delivering transport, including TfL, but not just TfL, really do need long-term sustainable funding settlements to allow them to kind of have proper plans looking not just 1-2 years ahead, but 5, 10, 20 years ahead. Think about the strategic infrastructure that London needs, which is going to unlock housing and help people get where they need to go when they need to get there.
100%.
Yeah.
And the fact that transport over the last 25 years has been one of the key things that the mayoralty of London has got as an area of responsibility. So irrespective of which political party is in power, the fact that it's a key part of what makes the mayor powerful and what they bring to the city, and the ability to think over a number of years to deliver what's important, I think has been a really important development. And as indeed, I think some of our respondents said.
So those are some of the things that's really changed in London over the last 25 years. Let's move a little bit closer to home and think about what we at TravelWatch have done. So when we asked our previous team members, our previous chief executives, the people we've worked with the most closely, what they think TravelWatch's biggest achievements have been, we got a really interesting response. Bit of a shout out to Joanna Davidson, who's one of your predecessors.
Yes.
And I think she put her finger on something very important when she said, it may seem like a small thing, but the campaign to make toilets free to use in each of the mainline stations has been a massive benefit to huge numbers of people. So that's kind of a really brilliant example of an issue which has not been making national headlines, but makes travel just possible for everybody in a way that it's really necessary to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The list, I mean, there's a long list of things that people came back to us, but it was a list that combined the kind of the big stuff. So we were there before you or I were in our post, pushing for the move to contactless and the move to Oyster. So we were there in the debates about the big stuff. But then you've got the kind of smaller issues like making sure that access to loo is free. And it's a bit like politics. All politics is local. All transport at the end of the day is local. And the small stuff matters as well as the big stuff.
Oh, totally. And one of the things I think I've seen London TravelWatch do, I mean, before I joined, but also kind of since I joined, is I think TravelWatch does a brilliant job of trying to make traveling a kind of a human being experience, of helping to understand, actually, it's the quality of the interactions that you have with the people that you're coming across when you're going about your journey that really make your experience, whether that's the kind of conversation you're having with your bus driver, or whether there's somebody at a ticket office who can answer your question about how can you get where you're going to go, or how can you buy a ticket. So transport is a human business, isn't it? And I think TravelWatch, in a number of different ways, and this did come back from the questions we asked, we do press for humanity and kind of support to be built into the delivery of transport services, not just to think just about the technology or the hardware. It's really, really about the people and the experience that they give the travelling public.
I think that's spot on. And I think where that plays out in what we do as an organisation was in one of the strong responses from people about, what is it that we've done well over the last 25 years, there were several references to the work of our casework function and our team of really well-informed, passionate, dedicated colleagues who are there when members of the public have exhausted the usual channels to try and get a problem solved, whether it's with Transport for London or whether it's with one of the train companies, and they come to us. We handle about 1,000 of these appeals a year.
Yeah.
And it's about putting a human voice at the end of a phone more often than not to say, look, we're here to help. And 3/4 of the time, we end up getting a better result for those members of the public who come to us than if they'd just given up and decided, oh, well, TfL have said no, or the train company has said no, there's no point in carrying on. So, it's great that actually our team, who sometimes have to listen to some difficult conversations from people who are very frustrated with a poor quality service, it's great that their hard work has been recognised in what we've heard back from respondents.
I totally agree. And I think our caseworking team in so many ways is kind of the heart of what we do as an organisation. Both because of the way in which it helps people get themselves out of sticky situations. And like you, I've seen lots and lots of great stories about results that have been achieved by our caseworking team. But also, I think for our policy work and our campaigns work, it gives us an irreplaceable source of information about what people are actually experiencing as they're out and about on the network. And there's some things, a good example recently is the kind of way in which some transport operators have been penalising people for technical mistakes which haven't cost them any money, maybe having the wrong kind of rail card or using the wrong kind of reference number when you're still paying for your ticket and you're showing there's no intention whatsoever to try and travel without paying. But those sort of technical cases, I think that was coming through our caseworking system, and I think it's been an area where good progress has been made in the last few months.
Exactly right. And so for those dissatisfied people who came to us and thought all hope was gone, actually we were able to, working with our sister watchdog, Transport Focus, on the national level, to play back some of those experiences, talk about the kind of injustice when someone has just made an honest mistake and yet is slapped with a penalty fare. We've converted that, and Transport Focus have converted that into some proposals, and the gist of it has been picked up by the regulator, who's saying, look, there's got to be some way in which we can just recognise that mistakes get made, and people have got to be given a bit of space for that.
Yeah, be sensible, just be sensible. Okay, well, let's look ahead a little bit. Shall we look ahead a little bit, Michael? I know.
Crystal ball.
So that's backwards. So we've talked a bit about how the transport system has changed. We've talked a little bit about what TravelWatch has been up to. But let's look ahead. So we've had 25 years. In the next 25 years, what do you think the biggest changes that are going to shape our work over the next 25 are going to be? It's a huge question.
So, actually, when we asked other people what they thought about it, for me, what struck me about the responses was the potential for technology in its various guises to make a difference. So, for example, the use of AI to, for example, make the ticketing system better. It was interesting, actually, when Andy Lord, the Transport Commissioner, came to our board meeting in the spring of this year, and we asked him the same sort of question, and he was interested in the potential for AI to reduce the number of times that there are trespassers on the public transport network, which would have safety benefits, clearly, but it will also have benefits in terms of reliability of the services. He's also interested in the role that technology might play in removing the need for ticket gates and barriers, which they're there for a good reason, but at peak times they slow you down and they don't make for a very nice environment. So just a few examples of how technology might make a difference, but people talking about driverless vehicles operating around the capital, which is maybe not that far away, actually. Uber taxis, talking about robo-taxis coming in for trialing. Whether it works, who knows? We might be there actually putting our hand up and saying, well, there are some human consequences about going down the use of technology in those ways. But technology feels like a potential major development. For me, what's interesting is trying to understand, is there a big thing? Is there a one big thing? A one big technological development? A bit like the Oyster of yesterday, or a bit like a big transport project like the Elizabeth line. Is there one big thing which is going to make a big difference? Or this is actually about 1,000 flowers blooming and lots of little things where technology is making life easier, making the transport system more effective. I have no idea. If I knew the answer to that,
I know.
you know, I'd be doing a different job and being very wealthy.
And I guess our job as London TravelWatch is just to make sure that as all that technology does find its way into the network, and it will, right? I think that's what we've seen over the last 25 years, is that some of the things that we would have thought of as kind of futuristic technologies have become kind of day-to-day experiences. But we are here to keep an eye on the human experience and to make sure that people are looked after. Everybody who needs the network is looked after through all of that. So, I mean, I would be expecting, I think, and I know this is a big deal for our organisation, an acceleration of delivery of more accessible transport.
Yeah.
I think public expectations on that have changed a lot.
Completely.
There's a much lower tolerance for not making our networks accessible for everybody. And we'll need to see a lot more of that over the next 25 years. And I think affordability, I don't know what you think, but I think affordability will continue to be a huge issue on transport in London. We talked about people who have the kind of jobs where they've got no option but to be commuters. I think there's some data that suggests that, you know, compared to other global cities, affordability is becoming a constraint on growth for London. So I think we will need to make sure that as technology develops, we're also making sure that those technologies are affordable for everybody who needs to use them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think there's an overlap between what do we think is going to happen and what do we want is going to happen, particularly from the responses we got. But I think one thing that's definitely in both of those spaces is about the move to a much more accessible transport system. And we think of this, or people tend to think sometimes, oh, well, this is about trying to do right by, you know, disabled passengers, for example. But I think those people who think about this for at least 5 minutes realize that actually if we make the system better for those people who may be mobility impaired, whether it's on a permanent basis or temporary, it actually makes the system better for all of us.
Yeah.
I don't think that priority is going to go away anytime soon. If anything, it's going to be stronger. Some of it's expensive to deliver. Still a Victorian transport system in many parts of the capital. And kind of converting that to be truly accessible, really expensive, but rightly, it feels like it's going to be a big priority.
So some things we've talked about we think might happen, but we're not sure when. One of the things that we know is definitely going to happen over the next few years are kind of changes to the setup of our rail network. And it was great to hear from Rufus Barnes, who was our first ever CEO here at London TravelWatch, that I think one of the things we've got to watch out for over the next few years is that rail continues to meet the needs of people who are travelling to London from outside London, but also people who are using the rail network to get around within London. I mean, we have quite big hopes and fears from the rail reform work, haven't we? Yes.
Indeed. Some of it is parochial,
Yeah.
because the plan for rail reform talks about a new national passenger standards authority to replace the existing transport focus. We're pretty confident that we've got a good case to say that a London-specific watchdog, London TravelWatch, is still a good thing to have. But I guess more importantly, with rail reform, the basic idea that we end the fragmentation that was created in privatization and replace it with a more joined up system where there is, whether you call it a guiding mind or a controlling mind, whatever, it doesn't matter. But the basic principle sounds great.
Yeah.
I think the real concern, and this isn't just for London, this is nationally, right, is what's going to happen in the meantime. So while all those wonderful people in the railways are focused on setting up the new institutions and new structure, the experience that the passengers are going through on a day-by-day basis using the trains, is that actually going to get better? Whether it's accessibility or whether it's about the reliability of services. In a world where we know money's short and tight, you absolutely got to stay focused on the day job as well as doing the other stuff about restructuring.
Totally. And our job, I think, as the industry restructures itself, for the people who need rail in London and around London, is just to hold the industry clearly to account for meeting people's expectations while all that is happening. And I think that's going to be, if I think about the next few years, I think that's going to be quite a big job for us. So, yeah.
It is. And
hang on to our hats.
I think we're going to be here for
a while.
For a while. And just reflecting on the London-specific dimension, the railways are moving from many, many separate fragmented players to a more monolithic, dare we say it, structure. Of course, in London, we've had a major monolith player for many years in the form of Transport for London. So we have lived with, and I think in many cases benefited from, they're an institution that provides that guiding mind, a strategy, and all the things trying to deliver the same set of objectives and priorities. But there's a but, which is that you have a single organization, and despite the fact that there are many great people, talented people working within it, the system sometimes, precisely because it's a monolith, maybe isn't as customer first as it needs to be, isn't as responsive as it needs to be to what's going on in the outside world, precisely because there isn't that pressure or competition or whatever it might be. So as the railways sort of move to that, we need to be on the lookout to make sure that customer first culture is strengthened in the railways, and we still need to make sure that it's being lived and breathed within Transport for London as well.
So let's finish off our conversation by getting to the radical end of the feedback we got. We asked our former CEOs, we asked our former board members, our former chairs, what would be a dramatic change that might happen in the future? And we also asked our newsletter subscribers as well. And an idea that came up from several people, and actually from the newsletter as well, is what about making some aspects of London's transport system, maybe the bus network, maybe others, completely free? I mean, like, no, not to have to pay for it at all. And it's a kind of a radical idea. It's not completely unprecedented. I think there are some other cities in Europe that have introduced free travel, at least for residents. I think Geneva and Tallinn have elements of free transport system. Do you think that's on the cards, Michael? And do you think it would be a good idea, or it might have unintended consequences?
It's a fascinating idea. And at one level, I get it, because education, free at the point of use, health, free at the point of use. So why not mobility? It's kind of like a right. And everyone would love things to be free. Completely understand that. Just personally speaking, I suppose I'm not yet convinced. And I suppose there are practical reasons. First of all, at the moment, if you're just thinking about TfL, they get about £5 billion a year from fares income. So how are you going to fill that gap? What happens when everyone who can now travel for free decides to get onto the buses or onto the tube networks? The network could get overrun. So I'm not sure how that works. And I guess a small part of me also wonders, why would you want to be giving a benefit to those parts of society who can actually afford to pay the fares anyway? So a lot of kind of interesting question marks, I think it throws up for me. To be honest, I think the way to go forward is more to make sure that where we need to provide help to people to travel and to make it affordable, that we target it and we make it much more personalised. And I would have thought in this day and age, we can progress from what we've got at the moment. There's like a family of concessions that TfL already offers, over 20 types of concessions, all sorts of cards, and actually use technology whereby each person's profile can determine the particular package of support they get. And I'd be really interested in looking at what we can do that way, rather than just giving everyone a free ride. Yeah,
I think that's really exciting. And that would allow, absolute people to have the kind of services that they really, really need.
Yeah.
I guess it would also manage the risk, I think you've seen in some places, that if you make travel free, then people will walk or cycle less, and walking and cycling is a kind of great, healthy way to get around.
Exactly.
But it's a big, bold thought, and we're really up for big, bold thoughts, aren't we?
Completely.
Fantastic.
Completely.
All right, look, that's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed this conversation about 25 years of London TravelWatch. Thank you very much. And thank you very much as well, especially, but not only, if you're one of our alumni or our previous chairs or members of staff who's responded to our questionnaire. It's been really great to hear from you and to reflect on 25 really important years for travel in London. If you'd like to find out more about London TravelWatch, do visit our website, do sign up to our newsletter, and do keep an eye out for more podcasts from us. But for now, thank you very much for watching and listening, and goodbye.
Thank you.